On Lucian's 60th birthday, he organized a reunion with his old classmates at my modest restaurant. As I pushed the cake cart into the room, I saw Lucian seated prominently next to his first love, Sophia. "I'm not as capable as your sister-in-law. I can't even wash dishes," Sophia said, delicately lifting her hand. "How can she compare to you? You're a celebrated painter now, and she's just an old hag," Lucian replied, his tone dismissive. Hearing this, I froze, unable to move, while resentment welled up inside me. Nearby, my sister-in-law and mother-in-law chatted openly. "If my brother had married Sophia, our family would be thriving now," Lyra muttered. "It's his fault for being blind," her mother added. My blood boiled as their words replayed in my mind. Overcome with rage and years of exhaustion, I collapsed. "Don't rush her to the hospital," Lucian said coldly. "Even if she survives, she'll only be a burden." His words sealed my fate. A life I had spent serving a family that now treated me as disposable. Anger gave way to despair, and the next thing I knew, I had been reborn, waking up in 1987, years before I married Lucian. To my astonishment, Lucian was behaving differently in this new timeline. He was avoiding asking for financial help and seemed eager to distance himself from me. It didn't take long to realize he had also been reborn. If this was a new beginning, I decided it was time to rewrite our story. "Why are you so late, Lyra? You'll make me late for school." Lyra's mother scolded me as she snatched the triangular bag from my hands. After peeking inside, her irritation grew. "Lyra wanted buns, and you brought tofu pudding? Is your brain made of tofu pudding?" Finding a sudden burst of courage, I grabbed the bag back. "If she doesn't like it, great. She won't get to eat it, not even for the dogs." I turned on my heel, climbed onto my rickety 28-inch bicycle, and wobbled out of the alley. At the intersection, a gust of wind carried away the tears streaming down my face. For the first time, I had defied my mother-in-law. Moments ago, they had casually decided my life wasn't worth saving, and now I was back, 40 years earlier, given another chance. My thoughts lingered on Lucian's birthday party in the previous timeline. He had insisted I spare no expense, claiming the reunion was for old classmates. Later, I discovered it was all a ruse to host Sophia, his long-lost love. As soon as word spread about Sophia's return, the classmates flocked to the gathering. I had painstakingly prepared for the event, going to the seafood market at dawn to ensure everything was fresh and managing every detail, from appetizers to main courses. My already fragile body strained under the effort. The classmates arrived in droves, chatting and laughing, but not one acknowledged me. Lucian had always found me lacking in sophistication, and I suspected he thought I wasn't fit to mingle with his guests. When it was time for the cake, I wheeled it to the door, waiting for the MC to finish. From the doorway, I saw Lucian and Sophia seated together chatting intimately. "This restaurant belongs to your wife." "Not bad," Sophia said with a graceful smile. "How can she compare to you? You're a distinguished artist, and she's just an old hag," Lucian replied. His voice carried across the room, each word cutting deeper than the last. The final blow came when I overheard Lyra and my mother-in-law nearby. If my brother had married Sophia, our family would be thriving now. "Whose fault is it that your brother is blind?" My chest tightened with rage and sorrow. Overcome with emotion, I collapsed. Now, in 1987, I was 20 years old, running a pancake stall to support my ailing mother and younger brother after our father's untimely death. My brother had taken on a low-paying factory job, while I dropped out of school to help my family make ends meet. That same year, Lucian's family moved into our neighborhood. They quickly began taking advantage of us. After Lucian and I started dating, the handouts from his family stopped entirely, and they began relying on me for their needs. Lucian, fresh out of high school with mediocre grades, needed 400 yen for tuition and books. His family couldn't scrape together the money, and my savings, earned through long hours at the pancake stall, were the only solution. I handed over everything I had, thinking I was helping someone who truly cared for me. But Lucian was always self-absorbed, seeing himself as a misunderstood genius. Whenever his career gained momentum, he would sabotage his own progress, falling back to square one. My small business kept his family afloat, yet they were oblivious to my sacrifices. Instead, they blamed me, claiming I was holding them back. Now, given this second chance, I was determined to rewrite the script. It was time to prioritize myself and my future, leaving Lucian and his ungrateful family behind. I made up my mind to stop supporting Lucian and let him fend for himself. After packing up my stall at the market, I pushed my tricycle home. The market was close to my house, but Lyra had made a big fuss about me bringing her breakfast because she didn't like the noise at the market and wanted to eat in peace before school. Even though I was worn out from the morning rush, I still managed to bring her food, only to be scolded as usual. Reflecting on this, I thought I must have been out of my mind in my previous life. When I wheeled the tricycle into the yard, Lucian's family was nowhere to be seen. My mother, though bedridden, was already awake, working on some sewing to help with expenses. I fetched water for her to wash her face and shared the leftover steamed buns and tofu pudding with her. "Did you and Lyra argue? I heard her yelling for you earlier," my mother asked cautiously. "No, we didn't argue. We broke up," I replied. She paused briefly before exhaling in relief. In my previous life, my mother had warned me not to marry Lucian's family, calling them unreliable. Unfortunately, I hadn't listened, and later, when she fell gravely ill, all our money had gone to his family, leaving nothing for her treatment. This time, a thought struck me. I had been given another chance, and I needed to make the most of it. I resolved to live well and focus on building a better life. Lucian's family had held me back before, but now I would seize every opportunity because earning money was my top priority. Isabella, come out for a moment. Lucian's voice called from the yard. I walked out to see his mother lingering nearby. What is it? I asked flatly, staring at him without emotion. When I looked at him now, the charm he once held had faded. Back then, he had seemed so polished compared to the other young men in the area. Now all I saw was an ordinary man. Let's break up. From now on, we'll go our separate ways and won't interfere in each other's lives, he said. His words caught me off guard. How could he steal my lines? For a moment, I was too stunned to respond. Misinterpreting my silence, a smug expression crossed his face, as if he thought I couldn't bear to let him go. But I surprised him. Fine, let's break up, I said firmly. But you need to return everything you owe me first. Then we'll be even. What are you talking about? Lucian's mother snapped, pulling him aside to whisper, You still need her money for your tuition. What are you doing? Don't worry, Mom. I'll handle it, Lucian said, shaking off her hand. Turning back to me, he declared, Isabella, stop pestering me. I'll pay back what I owe. Good, I replied. You owe me a year's rent, 60 when. Pay up or move out tomorrow. His confidence wavered, but he replied, Fine, I'll move out tomorrow. Was this a game of hard to get? No matter. I had no intention of wasting any more energy on him. With no ties to Lucian's family, I suddenly found myself with plenty of free time. I went home, took a nap, and woke up feeling refreshed. For lunch, I cooked a vegetable dish just for my mother and me. Normally, I would have prepared food for Lucian's family, but now that I wasn't obligated to, their absence didn't bother me. Lyra's mother peeked into our house, but when she saw me ignoring her, she huffed and went back inside. I couldn't help but laugh at her. In my previous life, her manipulative words had made me feel small and insignificant. This time, I was determined to show her what her precious son could accomplish without my support. After washing the dishes, I headed to the market. The first stall there was a small shop selling marinated meats, owned by Alexander. He was an elderly man, planning to retire and move back to the countryside. In my previous life, this was when he sold the shop for just 500 yuan, but I hadn't been able to afford it then. Now, with 400 yuan saved for Lucian's tuition, I had the chance to buy it. When I shared my intentions, Alexander smiled warmly. I've been watching you, girl. I always knew you'd go far. It's a deal. 400 yuan, and I'll throw in 100 as a bonus. Ecstatic, I agreed, and quickly finalized the paperwork. Returning home, I proudly told my mother what I had accomplished. How are you doing so well all of a sudden? She asked in surprise. It's because I got rid of that disaster, I said, hugging her tightly. That night, I crawled into bed early. In the past, I'd stayed up late to make snacks for Lucian, but now I had no such obligations. Still, I couldn't shake the thought of how resolutely he had broken up with me. Was it possible he had been reborn too? Just as I was drifting off to sleep, I heard someone shouting outside. Dressing quickly, I ran out into the alley. The usually quiet neighborhood was bustling with people, flashlights darting through the darkness. "Did you hear? Henry's daughter, Sophia, was kidnapped," one person exclaimed. "What? Is that true?" someone else asked. "Yes, but Lucian happened to pass by and saved her. He just brought her home." From their chatter, I pieced together the story. Sophia, attending night school, had been out late and was abducted. Lucian, in a stroke of timing, had been the one to rescue her. It all began to make sense. His sudden decision to break up with me, his newfound determination. He was setting himself up to pursue Sophia, his ideal partner. In my previous life, I had been too focused on survival to pay attention to local gossip. I only vaguely recalled that Sophia had been kidnapped, but she eventually married a college student named Rhett, and they moved to the provincial capital together. Now, it seemed Lucian had a new plan, and I wasn't part of it. But this time, I didn't mind. Let him chase his ideal life. Mine would be far better without him. The situation was complicated, and Sophia wasn't entirely without fault. Watching Lucian attempt to rewrite his life, I decided to observe from the sidelines and see how things played out. The night air was chilly, and as people realized Lucian hadn't yet emerged from Henry's house, they began dispersing. I headed home as well, uninterested in their affairs, and instead focused on plans for my newly acquired shop. The next morning, I skipped my usual trip to the market and went to Alexander's shop to finalize the handover. He was leaving for his hometown today, and I wanted to send him off properly. Yesterday, I had brought him a new quilt from home. His old one was worn out, its stuffing blackened from years of use. Now it was neatly rolled up, ready for him to take along. I handed him the new quilt and said, "Take it." He hesitated for a moment before opening the bundle to reveal the bright red cover. "I can't accept this. It's too valuable," he said emotionally. "Alexander, you sold the shop to me. That's our connection. Please accept this as my gift." The quilt had originally been part of my dowry, but since marriage wasn't on my agenda in this life, it was better used here. Tearing up, Alexander finally accepted it. Just then, a horse cart arrived. It was his nephew, coming to take him home. After bidding him farewell, I turned my attention to tidying the shop. The place was small and simple. 2 tables at the entrance held bowls for marinated meat, a large stove occupied the back, and a traditional heated bed, or kang, was tucked behind a half wall. I decided to repaper the ceiling, repaint the walls, and prepare the space for a future breakfast business. In my previous life, I had slowly built my shop into a proper restaurant over a decade. This time, I planned to achieve that much faster. Just as I was making plans, Alexander returned unexpectedly and handed me a small, dark notebook. Child, I've thought it over, and I want you to have this treasure. I can't take it with me. Use it well and don't forget me when you're successful, he said before hurrying away. Opening the notebook, I was stunned. It was his family's secret recipe for marinated meat, something people would pay dearly to learn. I had never dared ask him to teach me, respecting his boundaries. Yet now, he had entrusted me with this incredible gift. Moved by his generosity, I promised myself I would never let him down, no matter what the future held. Wasting no time, I cleaned the shop and gathered ingredients to test the recipe. I even bought half a pig's head to cook on the stove. As the meat simmered throughout the day, the aroma filled the air, and I knew I was on the right track. By evening, the pig's head was perfectly tender, and the shop looked cleaner and more inviting. My neighbor's grandmother wandered over, curious about the smell. "Are you opening a marinated meat shop?" she asked. "Yes, Grandma. Here, try some pig head meat and tell me what you think," I said, wrapping a piece in oil paper for her. "Oh, I feel bad taking this," she said, though she accepted it with a smile. I distributed the rest of the meat to nearby neighbors before locking up. When I got home, I planned to share some with my mother, who hadn't eaten meat in a while. As I entered the yard, something felt off. Lucien's family's door was closed, but voices drifted through the window. Inside my house, my mother was straining to eavesdrop. She raised a finger to her lips, signaling me to stay quiet and listen. From the conversation, I recognized Lyra's mom and Henry's wife, Sophia's mother. "Oh, there's no need to thank Lyra. This is just what anyone should do, right?" Lyra's mom said, her tone overly sweet. Sophia's mom replied, "This is a token of goodwill. 500 wen for Lyra to buy something nutritious. Please accept it." Lyra's mom protested. "There's no need for that. We're practically family. The kids are close enough already." "Well, even if they're just classmates, it's still good to show our appreciation," Sophia's mom said pointedly, emphasizing the word classmates as if to draw a boundary. I found the exchange amusing. It seemed Lucian was trying to follow a similar path as in my past life, using Sophia to advance himself. But Henry's family appeared uninterested in the arrangement. The money was likely an attempt to settle things quietly. After more polite exchanges, Sophia's mom left the money behind and hurried out. Just then, Lucian entered the yard, clearly having eavesdropped. "Grace, what brings you here?" he asked Sophia's mom, feigning friendliness. "Lyra, I just wanted to thank you for saving Sophia. For her reputation, let's not bring this matter up again," she said curtly. Lucian's face fell, his pride wounded. "Does Sophia feel the same way?" he asked. "Of course. She agrees completely," Sophia's mom replied firmly before rushing away. Inside, Lyra's mom panicked. What do we do now? They're not playing along. Give me the money. I'll return it to them, Lucian snapped. What about your tuition? You can't just give it back, Lyra's mom protested. You don't understand, Lucian said, storming out. It's better to fish for bigger opportunities. After leaving some food for my mother, I quietly followed Lucian. I made a large detour to avoid being noticed and arrived at a nearby school playground. There, a massive willow tree stood, its branches thick and green, even in winter. This was the secret meeting spot mentioned in Lucian and Sophia's letters. Soon I heard voices. Lucian, what's going on? Didn't my mom make it clear that you should take the money and let this go? Sophia's voice was sharp. What do you mean? Lucian asked, his tone icy. Exactly what you heard. We shouldn't stay in touch, and this matter is closed. If you think the money is too little, I can give you 200 wan more, but that's all I have, Sophia said bluntly. Are you trying to buy me off? Lucian asked, struggling to contain his anger. What else do you expect me to do? Sophia shot back. What do you want? Have you thought about marrying me? Lucian finally blurted out. Are you out of your mind? Why would I marry you? What do you even have to offer? Sophia retorted, her disbelief palpable. I watched from the shadows, amused by how far Lucian had fallen from his grand ambitions. Lucian shouted, I saved you! His voice filled with frustration. Did I ask you to? Someone else would have stepped in if you hadn't. You were completely unnecessary, Sophia snapped, her words laced with venom. Although her anger was clear, her words seemed to carry an underlying message that Lucian failed to grasp. Instead, he fixated on whether she thought less of him. Do you think I'm beneath you? Didn't you say I was your favorite? He demanded. Shut up. When did I ever say that? Are you insane? Sophia retorted, backing away in shock. Ignoring Lucian's desperate pleas, she fled in a panic. Frustrated and humiliated, Lucian tugged at his hair, releasing a guttural growl of anger. Were these two not meant to be together after all? Watching the drama unfold, I suspected Lucian wouldn't give up so easily, and decided to keep observing. My mother praised the pig head meat I had cooked, saying it was even better than Alexander's. I assumed the older generation had been stingy with their ingredients, while I made sure to give it my all, especially since it was my first attempt. Neighbors who sampled the meat raved about it, and the next day they returned, eager to buy more. I woke early, went to the market, and came back with a hefty sack of ingredients. Sorting through the pig heads, trotters, hocks, and offal, I cleaned them meticulously before tossing them into a large iron pot to simmer. With my business license updated, I renamed the shop Phuong Braised Meat Shop. This wasn't the name I used in my past life, but was inspired by the largest cooked food chain in the country. I dreamed of growing as successful as they were. Initially, I worried there might not be enough customers, but as soon as the meat was ready, it sold out almost immediately. By the afternoon, I had packed up early. I'd already arranged for a meat supplier to deliver directly to the shop the following morning, saving me time and effort. With my focus on the business, I realized my mother needed more attention. I decided to sell our old house, especially since the Lucian family was about to move out. With the proceeds, I could buy a single-story house behind my shop, creating a convenient living and working arrangement while keeping my mother close. The previous house's new owner was a neighbor with 5 sons. I offered them a slightly reduced price, which they accepted enthusiastically. They even offered to help relocate my mother. When Lyra's mom found out, she immediately confronted me. "What about us? Where are we supposed to live?" she demanded. I couldn't care less about their predicament. They had agreed to rent the house for 5 yuan a month, but had never paid a single coin. Despite trying to evict them, they refused to leave. Now that the house was sold, they had no choice. "That's not my problem," I said confidently, dismissing her protests. Intimidated, she backed off. My priority was getting everything finalized and focusing on my new life. I ordered a wheelchair for my mother so she could help with the shop's front-end work, and things quickly settled into a smooth routine. One evening, just after I'd closed up for the day, Lucian appeared. Startled, I spun around to face him. "What do you want?" I asked sharply. "I need to borrow 500 yen, he said coldly. "I don't have that kind of money," I replied, trying to push him out. He shoved his way back in. "Stop being difficult. My sister's seriously ill and needs to be hospitalized." His words triggered memories of my past life, where Lyra had also fallen ill with pneumonia. Her treatment had cost over 300 yen, wiping out my savings and leaving me helpless when my mother needed care later. "What's wrong with you? Why are you asking me for money?" "I'm not lending you anything," I said firmly. "This is your fault. If you hadn't kicked us out, we wouldn't be living on the streets, and my sister wouldn't be sick." "Of course I'm coming to you for help," he yelled. I opened the door, motioning for him to leave. "Are you insane? You stayed in my house without paying rent. Now that I've sold it, you expect me to arrange new housing for you? Do I owe you something? Am I your mother or grandmother? Get a grip." Our argument spilled outside, drawing a crowd of curious neighbors. In those days, with few sources of entertainment and even fewer televisions, any spectacle became the center of attention. Everyone gathered to see the drama unfold. The neighbors were familiar with the Lucian family's antics, especially after they had tried to drag out their stay in my old house. Eventually, they were forcibly removed, their belongings thrown out. Seeing Lucian causing trouble again only amused the onlookers. "Can you believe it?" Someone in the crowd chuckled. "Doesn't pay rent, but still has the audacity to demand money." Lucian, always concerned about his pride, grew red with anger. "This is your good deed? You've got no conscience. My sister is sick, and you refuse to help." "Conscience?" I shot back. "Do I owe you rent money? Why should I lend you a cent?" He hesitated, clearly at a loss for words. Unable to retort, he stormed off in frustration, and the gathered crowd dispersed, laughing. Without my financial support, Lucian's family quickly crumbled under pressure. Lyra's illness worsened, leaving her mentally impaired, with the cognition of a 3-year-old. Her mother, overwhelmed with stress, suffered a stroke. You had a girl willing to do everything for you, but you just had to aim higher. Now look at you. Lyra's mom scolded Lucian bitterly, her finger pointed accusingly at her daughter, who was now a shadow of her former self. Lucian, unable to stomach the criticism, turned his focus back to Sophia. Whatever he said this time seemed to work, as Henry's family suddenly agreed to the marriage and even helped them secure a house. The neighbors buzzed with speculation about the abrupt change in Henry's attitude. Preparations for the wedding were held right out in the open. Lyra's mom, bursting with renewed energy, flitted about like a butterfly. Sometimes I'd catch sight of Lucian and Sophia walking together. Lucian carried himself with exaggerated importance, deliberately passing by my shop as if to flaunt his achievement. Sophia, however, looked frail and disheartened. Shouldn't she be overjoyed to marry the man of her dreams? Something didn't add up. Over time, I pieced together the truth through neighborhood gossip. Sophia was pregnant. In those days, an unwed pregnancy was a scandal, which explained Henry's urgency to finalize the marriage. But based on their earlier exchanges, it didn't seem like Sophia wanted to marry Lucian. Had she truly carried his child in my past life? The wedding happened quickly. Lucian wore a blue coat, and Sophia donned a red wool suit with a fishtail design that accentuated her swollen belly, drawing everyone's attention. During the banquet, Henry and Sophia's mom appeared somber, clearly unenthusiastic about the union. Meanwhile, Lyra's mom was in her element, bustling about with boundless energy. Lyra, oblivious to the event's significance, caused chaos by snatching a pork elbow and gnawing on it, then wiping her greasy hands on Sophia's skirt. Infuriated, Sophia pushed Lyra to the ground, sending her into a fit of tears that no amount of consoling could quell. Lucian's forced smile betrayed his frustration as he tried to salvage the mood. These details reached me secondhand from the neighbors. I didn't bother verifying the rumors. I had no interest in their affairs anymore. Lucian had chosen his path, and I was content to see him navigate it without me. Ensuring my mom's health was my top priority, so I took her to the hospital for regular checkups. Meanwhile, luck seemed to be favoring me ever since I gave my shop its new name. Business was booming, and I was able to open a second location in no time. Lucian, too, appeared to be thriving. With his father-in-law's backing, he secured a clerical position in an office where his skill with words made him indispensable. Soon, he settled comfortably into his role, relishing the new life handed to him. But Sophia was a shadow of her former self. In my previous life, she had been someone who studied art, attended classes, and eventually became famous for her paintings. This time around, however, she seemed unrecognizable. Not long after their wedding, Sophia's appearance began to deteriorate. Her once graceful demeanor was replaced with the disheveled look of a weary, middle-aged woman. Occasionally, I'd see them together, and it was clear they were from two entirely different worlds. One day, as I worked on renovations at my newly purchased shop, I saw them pass by. Sophia, heavily pregnant, looked utterly miserable. Her swollen nose and red face made her look almost unrecognizable. She moved slowly, hands braced against her waist for support, while Lucian walked beside her, pushing a bicycle and glancing at her with clear disdain. "Can't you walk a bit faster?" Lucian asked impatiently. "I can't! Call me a taxi!" Sophia snapped, clearly irritated. Taxis were a rare sight back then, especially on quieter streets like ours. From their direction, it seemed they were headed to the hospital. Neighbors had mentioned that Sophia's relationship with her parents had soured after her marriage, and they no longer seemed willing to care for her. "Where am I supposed to find a taxi?" Lucian grumbled. "If you want to go, just go." He began pretending to mount his bicycle, a move I knew all too well. He'd treated me the same way in my previous life, dismissing me when I needed him most. Watching Sophia endure the same indifference I had once suffered brought an odd sense of irony. "Lucian, don't forget who gave you everything you have today." Sophia's voice shook with fury. "I earned everything on my own." "No one gave me anything," he replied darkly, stepping toward her and gripping her arm tightly. He dragged her forward with such force that she winced in pain and nearly stumbled. "Why are you like this? Why did you marry me?" she cried, shaking off his hand and glaring at him. "You just said everything I have is thanks to you. If that's true, why wouldn't I marry you?" Lucian shot back, his mask of pretense completely gone. Sophia's voice rose, filled with anguish. "You ruined my life." She lunged at him in fury, but Lucian dodged, causing her to fall to the ground. A dark stain began spreading beneath her. "I'll get an ambulance," Lucian muttered, before riding off on his bicycle. Thunder rumbled overhead, and rain poured down, soaking Sophia in an instant. I stood by the window, watching. I felt no sympathy, only detachment. "Lucian, you deserve a fate worse than hers," I thought, as Sophia's curses echoed in the storm. Sophia didn't wait for Lucian to return. Bystanders, unable to bear the sight, rushed her to the hospital. She miscarried and developed a high fever from an infection. Though Henry and his wife had their grievances with Sophia, their parental instincts kicked in when she fell seriously ill. They stayed by her bedside, chastising Lucian when he arrived late. The first thing Sophia asked for upon waking was a divorce. Her heart had shattered. Lyra's mom caused multiple scenes at the hospital, solidifying Henry's resolve to end the marriage. Lucian, unable to resist their pressure, eventually signed the divorce papers. I expected Henry to show some leniency, toward Lucian, but it wasn't long before he was dismissed from his office job, his qualifications deemed inadequate. The humiliation was too much for Lucian, who valued his reputation above all else. He stormed into the Henry home, causing a scene, but Sophia wasn't there. She avoided him completely. Coincidentally, Lucian's eviction day aligned with the grand opening of my sixth shop. As I cut the ribbon and the firecrackers went off, a convoy of cars arrived nearby, catching everyone's attention. Among the onlookers, I noticed a familiar gaze fixed on me. I turned to meet Lucian's eyes. He looked like a different man, his once vibrant face now pale and aged, as if 10 years had passed in just a few months. In contrast, I stood there in a flowing white dress, brimming with energy and optimism. My journey was only beginning, with endless possibilities ahead. "Isabella, look over here," a reporter called out, waving a camera. I offered a bright, confident smile, freezing the moment in time. Just then, I noticed Lyra chasing after a truck, her mother shouting and collapsing mid-chase. The commotion marked the final exit of Lucian's family from my life. I was so engrossed in my new life that I nearly forgot the events of my past one. But Sophia reminded me, "You wouldn't believe it, but I was reborn too," Sophia revealed when she appeared at my shop one day. "After you died in our last life, I was in a car accident with Lucian. That's when we both came back." Her words struck me. We had swapped fates. She was now worn and defeated, while I thrived with a vitality she could no longer grasp. "After being reborn, you still ended up like this?" I asked with faint surprise. "I can only blame Lucian," Sophia said bitterly. "It should have been Rhett who saved me that day. Lucian stole my chance and destroyed my life, my child, and my parents. So the child wasn't Lucian's." Suddenly, everything made sense. Why Henry had rushed the marriage and Lucian's hesitation to call an ambulance. "What do you want from me?" I asked cautiously. "My time is running out," Sophia admitted. "I came to tell you that I'll go after him in every life. I won't let him go." Her words sent a chill through me. Lucian's future would be anything but peaceful. Their once enduring love had devolved into a bitter curse, proving that even the strongest bonds could be eroded by time and circumstance.